For decades, a single, unshakable belief dominated the military thinking of the world's most powerful empires. In the late 18th century, British and American commanders held one truth to be self-evident: Native American armies could not defeat a European-style force in open battle. This wasn't just an opinion. It was doctrine, drilled into every officer and reinforced by years of colonial expansion. The thinking was simple: European armies had discipline. They had tightly packed formations, the unwavering line of infantry, the cold steel of the bayonet, and the thunder of artillery. Victory was a science, a formula of numbers, firepower, and centralized command. Native warriors, in their eyes, were masters of the ambush, the lightning raid, the war in the woods. They were respected for their skill in irregular warfare, their stealth, and their ferocity. But in a pitched battle, on an open field, the theory was they would simply break. Imperial officers believed that without the rigid structure of European armies, native forces lacked the cohesion to withstand a sustained, disciplined assault. They thought that under the immense pressure of volleys of musket fire and a determined bayonet charge, any tribal confederacy would inevitably collapse and scatter. This belief wasn't just abstract military theory. It had real-world consequences. It shaped the strategy of every commander sent into the American frontier, from the offices of power in London and Philadelphia to the muddy bootprints of soldiers in the Ohio Valley. This assumption was the bedrock of their plans. Frontier leaders, men who had spent their lives fighting on the edge of the empire, were convinced that if they could just force the native confederacies into a decisive, European-style confrontation, the long-running conflicts would be over. They believed that native resistance, so effective in raids and skirmishes, would crumble when met head-on. This wasn't just arrogance. It was a belief system built on selective memory. They remembered the victories, the times when disciplined columns had pushed ever westward. They conveniently forgot or downplayed the moments when they had been outmaneuvered or fought to a standstill. Every report sent back east, every military manual written, reinforced the same idea: discipline and drill will always prevail. The bayonet was seen as the ultimate weapon, a psychological tool that native warriors supposedly could not face. The structured command, with a single general directing the entire force like a chess master, was considered an insurmountable advantage over the more consensus-based leadership of the tribes. This conviction was so strong that it bordered on dogma. It led to a dangerous underestimation of their opponents. American generals marched their columns into the heart of native territory, confident that their professional soldiers, their flags, and their cannons guaranteed success. They saw the forests of the Ohio Valley not as a complex and dangerous landscape that favored their enemies, but as a simple obstacle to be crossed before the inevitable decisive battle where their superiority would be proven once and for all. And so, in the autumn of 1791, another American army marched north. It was led by Arthur St. Clair, the governor of the Northwest Territory. This was meant to be the campaign that would finally break the back of native resistance in the Ohio country. It was the largest army the young United States had ever assembled, a force of over 2,000 men, including regular soldiers, freshly raised levies, and militia. They had cavalry and, most importantly, they had artillery. This army was the very embodiment of that unshakable belief. It was a European-style force, designed for a decisive, open-field engagement. They were marching to prove the doctrine was right. On the morning of November 4th, 1791, encamped along the banks of the Wabash River, that army woke up, and in the misty, pre-dawn light, the world they knew was torn apart. A confederacy of native nations, led by Little Turtle of the Miami and Blue Jacket of the Shawnee, had been watching them, waiting. They weren't planning a raid or a skirmish. They were planning to annihilate the entire American army. And they had a strategy that would turn the Americans' greatest strengths into their greatest weaknesses. The attack came from all sides, a perfectly coordinated assault that caught the American camp completely by surprise. The native warriors didn't fight in the way the Americans expected. They used the terrain with masterful skill, firing from behind trees and fallen logs, melting back into the forest, and then reappearing to pour a devastating fire into the panicked American ranks. The American soldiers, trained to fight in tight formations in open fields, were trapped. Their disciplined lines dissolved into chaos. Their volleys of fire were ineffective against an enemy they could barely see. The American officers tried desperately to restore order. They ordered bayonet charges, the very tactic they believed would guarantee victory. Time and again, small groups of soldiers would fix their bayonets and charge into the woods. The native warriors would simply fade away before them, letting the charge exhaust itself. And then, as the soldiers fell back in disarray, they would close in again, their fire relentless and accurate. The American artillery, a symbol of European military might, was quickly silenced. The gunners were picked off by expert marksmen, and soon the cannons fell into the hands of the native warriors. The centralized command, which was supposed to be a key advantage, completely broke down. General St. Clair was ill and could barely move. His officers were killed or wounded trying to rally their men. In the confusion and terror, the army disintegrated. What had been a proud military force just hours before became a terrified mob, focused only on escape. The retreat was a slaughter. The native confederacy pursued them for miles, inflicting horrific casualties. When the dust settled, the scale of the disaster was staggering. Of the entire American army, nearly 1,000 were killed or wounded. It was the most severe defeat inflicted upon the United States military by Native American forces. A single battle had not just destroyed an army. It had destroyed a foundational belief of an entire military culture. The news of St. Clair's defeat, or the Battle of the Wabash, sent shockwaves through the United States. President George Washington was enraged. The public was horrified. The government in Philadelphia was plunged into crisis. The battle triggered the first ever congressional investigation in U.S. history. Everything was questioned. How could this have happened? How could the largest army the nation had ever fielded be so utterly and completely destroyed? The answer was simple, yet profound. The belief that had guided them was wrong. It was a fatal illusion. The native confederacy had proven, in the most brutal way imaginable, that they could not only stand against a European-style army in a pitched battle, but that they could decisively defeat it. They had used their own sophisticated tactics, their deep understanding of the landscape, and their own form of battlefield discipline to achieve a victory that was, by all European standards, impossible. This one moment, on a cold November morning in 1791, shattered a century of military doctrine. It forced the United States to completely rethink its frontier strategy, its army, and its understanding of its opponents. The arrogant assumption of superiority was replaced by a grudging, hard-won respect. The American military would eventually return to the Ohio Valley, but they would do so with a new army, the Legion of the United States, trained and equipped specifically to counter the tactics that had destroyed St. Clair's force. The illusion was broken, and American military history was changed forever, all because of one battle that proved everyone wrong. Step into the Ohio frontier of the late 18th century. This isn't a land of open fields and clear battle lines. It's a world of dense, ancient forests where sunlight struggles to reach the ground. Narrow trails, little more than footpaths, snake through an ocean of trees. Visibility is measured in yards, not miles. In this world, survival and victory belong to those who can move like ghosts, who know how to disappear into the landscape, not to armies marching in neat, predictable formations. This is a land that favors the ambush, the swift strike, and the silent retreat. It's a landscape that is itself a weapon for those who understand its secrets. And here, you meet a man who has mastered these secrets. He's in his early 30s, yet his name is already spoken, with a mix of fear and respect by the American settlers pushing west. He's Little Turtle, Mihikinokwa, a war chief of the Miami people. His reputation isn't a gift of birth or ceremony. It's been forged in the crucible of battle, and through victories over earlier American expeditions. He has already proven his brilliance, outmaneuvering and outfighting those who dared to challenge his people's claim to their ancestral lands. You learn that in the world of the Western Confederacy, leadership is a matter of demonstrated success. You lead because you win. Spend a moment trying to understand how he thinks. Little Turtle doesn't see war in terms of formal drills or textbook maneuvers. He thinks in terrain, in timing, in the spirit and morale of his warriors. He reads the landscape like a map of opportunities, seeing every ridge, every creek bed, every thicket as a potential advantage. He understands the psychology of his enemy, their reliance on slow, cumbersome supply lines and their vulnerability far from their forts. He knows that a warrior's heart is as important as the weapon in his hand. This deep, intuitive understanding of warfare sets him apart from his European and American counterparts. But what truly makes him different, what makes him a truly formidable opponent for the fledgling United States, is his philosophy of battle. For decades, many Native American leaders had fought a war of attrition, a strategy of hit-and-run raids and endless retreats, hoping to wear down the invaders over time. Little Turtle sees the futility in this. He recognizes that to stop the relentless American expansion, a decisive blow is needed. He isn't content to simply harass the enemy. He's willing to risk everything to destroy them in a single, catastrophic engagement. This audacity, this desire for a final, conclusive battle, is what makes him so dangerous. Now, let's pull back to see the broader conflict. The year is 1791. The United States, having just secured its independence from Great Britain, now casts its ambitious eyes westward, toward the vast, rich lands of the Northwest Territory. This is the land north of the Ohio River, modern-day Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin. To the Americans, it is a prize to be seized, a destiny to be fulfilled. But to the Miami, the Shawnee, the Delaware, and the other nations of the Western Confederacy, it is their home, a land they will defend to the last man. Diplomacy has failed. Treaties have been made and broken. Now, the United States turns to force. President George Washington and his Secretary of War, Henry Knox, are determined to crush the native resistance once and for all. They appoint a man to lead this decisive campaign, General Arthur St. Clair, the governor of the Northwest Territory. St. Clair is a veteran of the Revolutionary War, a man with considerable political and military experience. He is given his orders: march deep into the heart of contested territory, build a chain of forts to secure the land, and destroy any native force that stands in his way. This is intended to be the final chapter in the conquest of the Ohio country. The army St. Clair assembles is, on paper, an imposing force. With roughly 1,400 men, including regular army soldiers, freshly raised levies, and militia, it is the largest American army ever to operate on the frontier. The sheer size of this column is meant to be a statement, a demonstration of overwhelming American power. But as you look closer, you see the cracks. Many of the soldiers are poorly trained, poorly equipped, and poorly disciplined. They are a mix of veterans, raw recruits who barely know how to handle a musket, and camp followers who slow the column's progress. This moment matters. The future of the entire Northwest Territory hangs in the balance. If St. Clair succeeds, the native Confederacy will likely be shattered, and American expansion will surge forward unchecked. If he fails, it will be a monumental disaster for the young United States, a humiliation that could embolden its European rivals and stall its westward push for years. The stakes could not be higher for either side. For the United States, it is a test of its national will and military might. For Little Turtle and the Confederacy, it is a fight for their very existence. As St. Clair's army begins its slow, arduous march north from Fort Washington, near modern-day Cincinnati, the pressure begins to build. Every day, the supply lines stretch thinner, more vulnerable to attack. The autumn rains turn the crude trails into a quagmire of mud, slowing the heavy wagons and artillery to a crawl. Sickness begins to sweep through the camps. And all the while, the chilling specter of winter approaches. The soldiers are dressed in summer uniforms, and the threat of freezing temperatures and starvation looms larger with each passing day. The army is a slow-moving, vulnerable giant, bleeding strength with every mile it covers. All this time, Little Turtle and his scouts are watching. They shadow the American column, invisible in the deep woods. They count the soldiers, note their lack of discipline, and report on their slow, painful progress. Little Turtle, along with other brilliant leaders like the Shawnee chief Blue Jacket, is gathering warriors from across the region. They are planning, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They know the American army's weaknesses, and they intend to exploit every single one of them. Now, as St. Clair's exhausted army makes camp along the banks of the Wabash River, the stage is set. Little Turtle confronts the impossible challenge he has been seeking. Can he, with a force of around 1,000 warriors, truly destroy a professional army in a single, decisive battle? He has the advantage of surprise, knowledge of the terrain, and the fierce determination of his warriors. St. Clair has superior numbers and artillery, but leads a demoralized and unprepared force. Everything has led to this moment. The fate of a continent will be decided in the cold, grey dawn of November 4th, 1791. It's November 4th, 1791. The air is cold, biting at your exposed skin as you move with General Arthur St. Clair's column. You're near the headwaters of the Wabash River, deep in what will one day be Ohio. The men around you are exhausted, their movements slow and heavy. 4 weeks, they've marched through an unforgiving wilderness of mud, rain, and constant, gnawing fear. Now, they struggle to set up a proper camp, their hands fumbling with frozen equipment. You can hear the metallic clink of musket parts as they try to stack arms and prepare defenses. But these men are not the disciplined soldiers of a textbook army. Many are poorly trained levies, their spirits broken by the grueling campaign. Discipline has all but evaporated, replaced by a weary desperation. The officers, frustrated and tired themselves, try to impose order, but their shouts are lost in the general malaise. No one here truly comprehends the danger they are in. Unseen, unheard, the forest watches. You sense a presence beyond the trees, a stillness that is anything but peaceful. Under the command of the brilliant Miami war chief Little Turtle, and allied with Blue Jacket of the Shawnee and Buckingham of the Delaware, a confederation of Native American warriors has gathered. More than 1,000 of them. They have shadowed St. Clair's army 4 days, waiting for the perfect moment. Now, they encircle the disorganized American camp in absolute silence. Each warrior finds their concealed position, a ghost in the pre-dawn gloom, their eyes fixed on the unsuspecting soldiers. They are a patient, disciplined force, united in their determination to defend their land from this invading army. The contrast between the two forces is stark. One, a weary, demoralized column stumbling into a trap. The other, a coordinated, highly motivated coalition, poised to strike. The first hint of dawn streaks the eastern sky, painting the clouds in shades of grey and orange. It should be a moment of hope, the promise of a new day. Instead, it's a signal for annihilation. Suddenly, the quiet is shattered by the deafening crack of musketry. The shots explode from the woods, precise and deadly. The sentries, posted as the army's first line of defense, fall almost instantly, their cries cut short. The surprise is total, absolute. Sleep-dazed soldiers jolt awake to a nightmare. Musket balls tear through their tents, ripping through canvas and flesh alike. The attack comes not from one direction, but from all sides. The warriors have executed a perfect encirclement, and now they pour a relentless fire into the heart of the camp. Panic surges through the ranks like a tidal wave. Men scramble from their bedrolls, grabbing for weapons, many still half-dressed. They are disoriented, terrified. The neat formations they drilled in back east are impossible to create under this withering assault. Officers, swords drawn, shout commands that are swallowed by the cacophony of gunfire, war cries, and the screams of the wounded. There is no line of battle, only pockets of desperate men trying to fight back against an enemy they can barely see. The woods flash with muzzle blasts, but the warriors themselves remain elusive, using the trees and terrain for cover with masterful skill. For the American soldiers, it's like fighting phantoms, and the one-sidedness of the engagement quickly becomes terrifyingly clear. The minutes stretch into an eternity of chaos. The initial volleys from the regular troops, those with more training, are fired with some discipline, but they have little effect. The warriors are too well concealed. Return fire is sporadic and panicked. The American artillery, the great equalizers of European warfare, are rendered useless. The gun crews are targeted with brutal efficiency. Men are cut down as they try to load and aim their heavy cannons. Horses are shot, preventing the guns from being moved into better positions. A few pieces manage to fire a round or two, but their shots fly harmlessly into the forest. The noise is overwhelming, a constant roar of muskets, the high-pitched screams of dying men, and the chilling war cries of the attackers echoing from the trees. The carefully constructed machine of a European-style army is being systematically dismantled. You can feel the battle's outcome becoming an inevitability. Hope drains away, replaced by a cold dread. You see men with shaking hands, their faces pale with shock, trying to reload their muskets. They spill powder, drop ramrods. Their movements are clumsy, uncoordinated. The wounded try to fight on, propping themselves against trees, their strength failing. The ground becomes slick with blood. The warriors, sensing victory, press their attack, closing in. They move with fluid grace, firing, reloading, and advancing from cover to cover. They are a whirlwind of controlled violence, exploiting every weakness in the American defense. The soldiers' initial shock has turned into sheer terror. For them, there is no strategy, no grand plan, only survival, and survival seems increasingly unlikely. In the midst of the carnage, you see General St. Clair. He's a veteran of the Revolutionary War, but he has never faced anything like this. He remains on his horse, a conspicuous target, trying to rally his collapsing army. He has several horses shot out from under him. He shouts orders, but command and control have completely broken down. Then, you see him struck. He's wounded, and his aides rush to carry him from the center of the fight. With the general out of action, what little leadership remained on the field dissolves. The chain of command is shattered. It's every man for himself. The retreat begins not as an order, but as a spontaneous, panicked flight. Soldiers throw down their weapons and run, desperate to escape the slaughter. The collapse is now total. Warriors surge into the camp, overrunning the last pockets of resistance. The scene is one of utter devastation. Tents are torn down, supplies are scattered, and the fight devolves into brutal, hand-to-hand combat. The retreat turns into a rout, a desperate stampede back down the path the army had just marched. The wounded are left behind to their fate. The warriors pursue the fleeing soldiers 4 miles, ensuring the defeat is absolute. In less than 3 hours, the battle is over. The American camp is a smoldering ruin, littered with the bodies of the dead and dying. You stand amidst the silence that follows, a silence broken only by the groans of the wounded. The final tally is staggering, almost unbelievable. Out of an army of roughly 1,000 men, more than 600 are dead, hundreds more are wounded. It is a casualty rate that dwarfs almost any other battle in American history. You realize the profound significance of this moment. This isn't just a defeat, it is a catastrophe. It remains the single worst defeat inflicted upon the United States Army by Native American forces. The name St. Clair's defeat, or the Battle of the Wabash, will be seared into the nation's memory as a symbol of military disaster and a testament to the power and resolve of the Western Confederacy. The young United States has been delivered a brutal, humbling lesson on the frontier, one that will reshape its policies and its understanding of the fight for the continent. Thank you for joining us on this journey back to a pivotal and often overlooked moment in history. The story of St. Clair's defeat is a powerful reminder of the complexities and costs of American expansion. You step back and you see shock ripple through the British observers who thought they knew the lay of the land, and it sends a seismic jolt through the American leadership, all the way to President Washington himself. This isn't just a loss, it's a national crisis. You understand in this moment that an entire military doctrine is forced to confront its own catastrophic failure. The belief in the inherent superiority of a European-style army against so-called savage fighters has been shattered into a million pieces on a cold November morning. What follows is nothing short of a revolution. You watch as the United States is forced to tear down its own army and rebuild it from the ground up, brick by painful brick. This process is born from utter humiliation, and it leads directly to the creation of a new, more professional fighting force, the Legion of the United States. This isn't just a rebranding. It's a fundamental rethinking of what it means to be a soldier, how to train, how to fight, and most importantly, how to survive on the brutal frontier. You recognize that this singular, devastating defeat directly shapes every campaign that follows, particularly those under the command of General Mad Anthony Wayne. He learns the lessons of St. Clair's disaster, studying the tactics of Little Turtle and Blue Jacket, and he creates a force specifically designed to counter them. You understand, with startling clarity, that the very definition of frontier warfare is redefined by this moment. The old rules are gone, burned away in the fires of the encampment. But amidst the grand sweep of strategy and politics, you return to the human cost. That's where the real story lives. You remember the hundreds of soldiers who died, many of them newly enlisted, some barely old enough to shave, all of them unprepared for the nightmare that awaited them. They were promised adventure and steady pay, but they found a terrifying and violent end far from home. Their final moments are a haunting testament to the cost of a nation's overconfidence. And on the other side, you remember the native warriors. These weren't faceless aggressors. They were men fighting to protect their land, their families, and their sovereignty from an ever-encroaching force. For them, this was not a battle for territory alone. It was a fight for their very existence, for their way of life. This victory, while stunning, was part of a much longer, much more desperate struggle against the tide of westward expansion. And then you learn something remarkable about the brilliant strategist behind this victory, Little Turtle. In the years that follow, as the United States returns with its new, formidable legion, Little Turtle advocates for peace and restraint. He recognizes the changing calculus of power. He understands that while one battle can be won, the war against a nation with seemingly limitless resources is a different proposition entirely. This demonstrates a strategic clarity that extends far beyond the battlefield, a wisdom that sought to preserve his people, not just win a fight. It shows a leader who could see the long game, even when others were blinded by the glory of a single day. You now understand why this story truly matters. It's not just a dusty battle from a forgotten war. It exposes the timeless, universal cost of arrogance and underestimation. It's a stark reminder that dismissing an opponent, refusing to understand their motivations, their capabilities, and their resolve is a direct path to disaster. This lesson echoes from the Ohio Valley in 1791 all the way to the boardrooms and battlefields of today. Finally, you feel a sense of responsibility settle upon you. As a listener, as a witness to this retelling, you now carry this memory forward. The men who fell, the families who mourned, the leaders who fought for their homes, their story now lives in you. It's a heavy but necessary weight, the weight of remembrance. If this story moved you, if it made you think, please click the like button to help keep this history alive for others to discover. We are committed to rescuing these forgotten stories from the archives, pulling them out of the footnotes and into the light. We invite you to subscribe and join our community of history lovers. In the comments, tell us where you're watching from, and if someone in your family has ever served. We'd be honored if you'd share that with us. Thank you for ensuring that little turtle and the more than 600 men of St. Clair's army are remembered. Because history only survives when we, together, choose to remember it.